Good evening, everyone. Going to give everybody just a second to come on in. Thank you for joining us this evening. Going to get started shortly. All right, I don't want to keep you guys too long this evening. I want to thank you for joining us for this evening's training. My name is Vincent Harrison of Escape Student Loan Debt. We are an online education company with training programs that offer step-by-step debt reduction and debt elimination techniques for federal and private student loan borrowers who have student loan payments or balances that have just become a major barrier in one aspect of their life. That could be their credit. That could be their dreams for homeownership. It could be even in their relationship. Whatever it is that they're struggling with as related to their student loan debt, we offer solutions for those people. In today's quick training, I want to give you a story that illustrates some of the things that we've done for some of our students. And in this particular case, we had a student who came to us a few years ago who lived in South Florida. They lived in South Florida with their wife, and they came to us because they had just had a real secret exposed when it came to their student loans. And I know that sounds odd to say, well, how secret could your student loans be? But let me give you a little background. The person that we were working with was a project manager by trade, loved project management in the South Florida area. And prior to them getting the student loans, they had taken out undergrad loans that were just, $5,000 to $10,000 their last semester of school, and really wasn't something that was bothering them. But when they decided to go back to their MBA program for project management, they did so with the understanding that they were going to have to take on a lot of debt. But it was a calculated risk, a calculated gamble, because they knew that if they could get an MBA in that project management field, it was going to position them to get so much more income on the back end of that program. And you see this so often, right? Where there's such a cost to putting yourself in a position to earn more and to progress financially. And unfortunately, student loans are that cost for many people, and they were the cost for this student that we were helping. So they go through this MBA program and they took on about $55,000 worth of debt each year. So they graduate with a little over $100,000 and $110,000 in federal student loan debt. And what many people don't realize is when it comes time to start paying back your federal student loans, the default option that your student loan servicer is going to give you is a plan that requires you to pay that loan off in full within 10 years. And if you're thinking about how much it would take to pay off $110,000 in 10 years, it's a lot of money. So this person we were dealing with got a bill when the time came to start repaying their loans of $1,200 that they were going to have to pay every single month. Now, if you've gotten a higher degree, you also know that it's not necessarily an immediate jump of 2 and 3 times your income. So unfortunately, our student left that MBA program, but for the first 2 or 3 years, they were still making about $50,000, $55,000 a year. So $1,200 a month was simply not possible to do month after month after month. And as a result, they didn't pay month after month after month. Maybe every once in a while they could pay that $1,200, but because they didn't know other options were available, they would let months go by without paying. And after a period of time, they started noticing that their credit was just in the trash. They had missed payments, and they said, what's the point? If my credit's already trashed, why should I pay now? Well, unfortunately, there's another consequence to not paying your student loans above and beyond the impact it has on your credit. After a certain period of time, our borrower in South Florida got a notice that they were in delinquent status with their student loans. And then they got another notice a few months later that said they were in default status with student loans. I can tell you that there are so many things that I wouldn't wish upon my worst enemy. Having federal student loans in default is one of them. Because one of those consequences of being in that situation is that your student loan servicer has the ability to garnish your wages until that loan is repaid. Not just your wages, they can garnish your tax refund. They can garnish things like child support payments or alimony payments. In some states, if you have defaulted student loans, you can even have your professional licenses revoked until you get out of default status. Now, at the period of time that this started, our student had defaulted wages or garnished wages, excuse me. They really weren't that much of a concern. I mean, nobody wants to have your check reduced before you get it. But, a few $100s a month, it wasn't something that was keeping them from doing what they needed to do. Now, as their income progressed, they started making more and more and more, and they got to the point where they were making around $125,000 a year. And the garnishment is based on a percentage of income. So it continued to grow and grow and grow. And it reached the point where before this person was ever getting their check, almost $900 a month was being garnished by the federal government. And it would continue to be garnished until they had repaid over $100,000 of student loans. Now, you can imagine when I talked at the beginning of this story about it being a secret, that's something that you don't want to tell everybody. If you're making $125,000 a year and the IRS is garnishing your wages, you're not exactly under the covers of your situation, living a lifestyle that it looks like on the outside. People expect you to be living in a certain place. They expect you to be driving a certain car. And this person was doing all those things, but little did people know, hey, when they're dealing with their finances at home, they don't even get their full check. The IRS gets the first crack at it before they do. Even with that, this person kept their secret, but then they got married. And if you've been married and you've gone through the process of combining finances, you know there's going to be that night at the kitchen table where you finally sit down and say, what do you have in the bank and who do you owe and what do you owe? And when this person had that conversation, immediately they went from on paper being the perfect match, the perfect catch when it came to financial opportunities, to in 1 hour becoming a person who was just an albatross, an anchor on their wife's finances. As a matter of fact, when they started talking about where they wanted to live long term and where they wanted to have a family, they realized that where they were in South Florida just wasn't big enough. And they started looking for homes that fit their needs. But unfortunately, after that conversation, after talking to lenders, after looking at our students' credit report, they realized that not only were their student loans so bad that their credit was trashed, but it was so bad that they could not even be on a home loan at all, even though they made over $125,000 a year. So in order for them to get this new home, they would be forced to only have their needs and the things they were eligible for based off of his wife's income. But unfortunately, she did not make enough on her own to qualify for a house of the size that they needed to actually have an upgrade. They would just be in the same situation they were in. So if you're looking at this, he's in a little bit of a pickle. If he puts his loans on the front burner, he still is not going to be able to address them in time for them to get the house that they need. And if you look at what's going on with his spouse, she's looking and saying, we didn't have these conversations before, we should have. And now I thought we were going to be able to make some moves financially, but we can't because you didn't handle these things on the front end before we met me. Now that's a tough place to be in as any spouse, but definitely if you know that on the surface, on paper, you have everything going for you, you should be able to do these things that society says you should be able to do, if not for the fact that this federal student loan is hanging over your head. This is where we met our student, and I want to tell you just a couple things that we did for them to put them in a better situation. And no, it's not something where in a month's time they were able to buy a home. That's not always the solution, but we can get you in a better place if we understand what you're dealing with. So what was this person dealing with? The first was the defaulted loan. There is a program that the federal government offers for people who have only defaulted on their student loans once, where in a 10-month period of time, they can have that defaulted status removed from not just their student loan servicer, but also from their credit report. It can radically improve your credit over that 10-month period of time, but there are certain parameters. And typically those parameters are that you pay a set amount of money during each month of that 10-month period. Thankfully, when we met our student, it was right after the CARES Act was passed by the federal government. Congress passed the CARES Act, and as part of the CARES Act, there were a couple of things that it offered in terms of relief to student loan borrowers in default. The first was that garnished wages would cease. During the CARES Act period, there would be no garnishment of wages, no garnishment of tax refunds, no garnishment of alimony payments. But they also said that as a part of this program, students who were rehabilitating their loans as a part of that option offered by the federal government would not have to make any payments during that process as well. So If you're keeping up with this, for the 10 months, because of the CARES Act, they wouldn't have their wages garnished and they wouldn't have to pay towards their student loans in order to restore their status. They could wipe away all those years of negative history with no impact, no money on their end. But here's the funny thing. We called their student loan servicer to tell them about this and ask if we could enroll in the program, and their student loan servicer told us that we were incorrect, that they would have to continue making payments during that 10-month period of time, and they asked for information so that they could calculate what that payment would be. Another lesson that I want you to keep a hold of tonight is that your student loan servicer may not have the accurate information. They may not have the most up-to-date information. It's up to you to know what you're dealing with and make sure that you get the opportunities that you know are coming to you. And the way that we did that was we went to the federal student aid website, the actual Department of Education website, found the proof of what we were asking for, downloaded it, made screenshots of it, and faxed and scanned it into that student loan servicer to show them that they were wrong and we were right. So something that they didn't even know existed, we brought to their attention to make sure that our student got that opportunity. Lastly, we set up a payment plan to make sure that for the other areas of their finances that were impacting their credit, while we had that 10-month reprieve of no student loan payments and no garnished wages, we could use the money that he was already used to having taken out of his check to attack his consumer debts so that by the time his loans were rehabilitated and the default was lifted from his credit report and his loan servicer, his consumer debt would be paid as well. All of this started with knowing that the program was available, but also knowing that because of the CARES Act, he would not have to make a payment, nor would he have garnished wages during that time period. Again, you have to know what's available. You have to know what you have access to. You have to know what your rights are as a student loan borrower, and you have to know when to deploy them. And if you have that information, you can make a world of difference when it comes to your federal or private student loans. Thank you for joining us for tonight's training. My name is Vincent Harrison. I hope you enjoyed these stories that we're going through and some of the tips that we're providing. And if you are an established professional and you have a federal or private student loan balance or payment that's become a major barrier to your finances, whether it is your marriage, your credit, your dreams of home ownership or business ownership, then I invite you to check out our programming so you can get step-by-step debt reduction, elimination techniques that will reorganize, consolidate, refinance, or even reduce the amount that you owe if you are a participant in our program. So if you are interested, check out those programmings by visiting the link at the end of this video or at the bottom of this video, and I will see you again soon.